I buried my wife on a Thursday that pretended to be spring. The sun was out, but the wind still had winter's teeth, and every time it cut across St. Luke's Hill, the flags above the cemetery snapped like someone scolding the sky. People from church squeezed my hand and told me I'd done right by Nora, picked the hymns she loved, the readings she'd underlined, but when the last casserole-toting sedan left our street in Cedar Falls, Oregon, the quiet felt less like mercy and more like a test. I stood in the kitchen with the faucet running because its soft hiss tricked my mind into thinking the house wasn't listening to me breathe. Nora's mug sat upside down on the drying rack, a chipped blue thing with a lemon painted on its side. She'd always said, "Plant a lemon tree out back, Tom. The yard wants something to remember." I never did. We lived under firs and maples. It didn't seem like citrus country. But her mug had a way of catching the afternoon light, and when it glowed, I could almost hear her half laugh, then give it a corner of your patience. She planned like that, gently, with a nudge, never a shove. By Friday morning the phone started. Condolences first, then practical people clearing their throats. "If you need help sorting paperwork, if you want me to call the realtor, if you're not up for living alone, we could." I said thank you, until the word thinned out and sounded false in my mouth. Then the family calls began, and thank you had to move aside. My son Adrian spoke as if he were already standing in my doorway with a clipboard. "Dad, don't be alone with all this. I'll drive down tonight. We should talk through the logistics. I know it's painful, but the house is a lot to manage." The house, as if it were a misbehaving pet. I could hear a keystroke echoing through his headset. Even in grief, my boy logged his hours. "Give me the weekend," I said. "I'll be fine." "Weekends turn into months," he said, and then softened his tone. "I'm only trying to help." My daughter Lila led with a different kind of concern. "Dad, I hate that you're alone there. Mia and I want to drive over on Sunday, bring dinner, sit with you a while. Also, the market is unbelievable right now. You'd get top dollar, and you wouldn't have to keep up with repairs." Lila used words like repairs and top dollar, the way some people say condolences. They sounded like care until you held them to the light. "I'll see you Sunday," I said. After I hung up, I walked the room slowly, touching door frames like a man checking the corners of a tent before a storm. In the study, a rectangle of sun lay across the rug, and dust moved through it, as if time itself had started to show. I remembered the day we moved in, Nora guiding the sofa toward the window, telling me to stop when she could see the maple's trunk framed just so. "Little things, Tom," she'd said, tapping my wrist. "A home is 1,000 little choices that agree with each other." The house had agreed with us for 32 years. I wasn't sure it would agree with my children's urgency. Saturday smelled like pine cleaner and black coffee. I opened the windows and let the cold in, because Nora said a house should breathe after the last guest leaves. I stacked sympathy cards in a shoebox and put the foil-wrapped casseroles in the freezer until every shelf looked like tinfoil roofing. When the doorbell rang, I braced myself for one more neighbor with flowers, but it was a courier, young and wind-chapped, holding a thick manila envelope. "Sign here, sir." I signed. No return address, only my name written in careful block letters. On the kitchen table, I slid a butter knife under the flap and lifted out a folder the color of a school bus. Inside, everything was neat. Tabs, copies, sticky notes in Nora's handwriting, the tidy forward motion of a woman who knew that planning is a love language. My thumb caught on one tab labeled House Primary, another labeled Insurance, and a third that made the room tilt a few degrees, Cedar Falls, Cascais. I sat down very slowly. The first page was a letter. No, a map disguised as a letter, written months ago when we still believed in longer summers. "If you're reading this," she began, "then I didn't get to nag you about doing things the slow way." She'd always said the slow way was the honest way of time. The rest of the letter laid out what she had sorted on my behalf, which bills needed cancelling, whom to call about the garden shed roof, which lawyer knew our story, which bank manager wouldn't try to sell me a new product. She had even drawn a small lemon in the margin next to the phrase, "Plant the tree." Cascais, I traced the word as if it might run from my finger. The tab held copies of papers I remembered only faintly, signatures notarized under maritime flags in a quiet office 2 summers ago when Nora said, "We're not getting younger, Tom. Let's give ourselves a reason to keep walking." We had spent 10 evenings then arguing gently about courage and routine. She had won, as she usually did when it came to choosing life over comfort. What I had forgotten, or perhaps chosen to forget, was how thoroughly she finished things once she started them. The phone lit up again. "Adrian, on the road. Be there by 6. Lila, bringing Mia tomorrow. Don't cook a thing. I turned the phone face down and returned to the folder, not because I was hiding, but because Nora had set a tempo, and I needed to hear it. The yellow tabs sang in order: primary, insurance, bills, until a fourth one hushed me. Conversations. In half a page she spoke to me more clearly than anyone at the graveside. You'll want to be generous with the kids, she wrote, and you should be. But be generous with the right things: your time, your memories, your blessing, not with the roof over your head. Grief makes people rearrange other people's furniture, thinking it helps. Remind them that love is not logistics. There was a small note beneath it, a practical aside that only Nora would tuck under a benediction. If they press, call Miles Redding. He knows where every copy is. Keep originals in the blue box. Blue box. When I opened the hall closet, the smell of cedar and old wool met me. The box sat on the highest shelf, labeled with my name written corner to corner, so big I couldn't pretend to miss it. Inside I found what the letter promised: certified copies, keys taped inside tiny envelopes, a printout of an email chain with timestamps and benign subject lines that told a story only if you knew where to look. In one small envelope, a photo, not a house exactly, but a white wall with a lemon tree in front of it, its leaves glossy, the fruit stubbornly bright. On the back Nora had written, "See, it grows where patience lives." By the time Adrian's taillights glided up the driveway, the sky had bleached into evening. He knocked once and let himself in, a habit he'd kept from college breaks. He hugged me hard, and I felt the weight he carried, the ledger he was trying to balance between son and problem solver. He set his overnight bag by the door and scanned the room the way he scanned spreadsheets. "Dad," he said, "I'm proud of you for getting through this week. I know it's been brutal. Let's talk through a plan so it doesn't keep swallowing you." He glanced at the mantel, at the pictures, at the stack of mail I had squared on the table. "The house is beautiful, but—" "Adrian," I said, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded, "we will talk. Tonight we'll eat what Mrs. Benson brought over, and you'll tell me about your latest project, and I'll tell you about the minister who can't sing on key, and we won't fix my life in one sitting." He nodded, apparently relieved to be given steps, even if they were small. Still, after dinner, while I washed plates and he dried, he edged toward it again. "If we list sooner, we control the narrative," he said. "You get money in the bank, you get out from under maintenance, and you can be near me or Lila. It's just smart." "Smart isn't the same as right," I said quietly. "I didn't say, your mother knew this was coming. I didn't say, she left me a second horizon because she understood the first would be crowded. I only dried my hands and watched the window blacken as if the yard had pulled a curtain." He opened his mouth to press again, then closed it and studied my face. "Okay, we'll take it slow," he said, which is the way people promise patience while measuring your stamina. After he went to the guest room, I returned to the kitchen and placed the blue box back on the shelf. The house sighed around me, its old bones settling. I set Nora's lemon mug right side up on the counter and filled it with water, just to feel its weight. The wind pushed against the eaves and the maple answered, and in that conversation I heard what the folder had been saying all along. I didn't have to argue. I only had to keep faith with what had already been signed, dated and copied twice. On Sunday, Lila would come with Mia, smelling like a bakery and a plan. On Monday, calls would thicken. On Tuesday, someone would say conservatorship as if it were a kindness. The world would pretend grief makes a person simple. But I had a lemon tree to plant, even if the ground here was wrong for it, and I had a second place where the soil had already said yes. I rinsed the mug, set it gently on the rack, and turned off the light. In the dark, I could feel the house leaning with me, neither for sale nor in danger, just listening. Upstairs, floorboards whispered under Adrian's feet, the sound of a son who wanted to fix what couldn't be fixed. I let him have his sleep, and I let the night keep its secrets. Tomorrow, when Lila arrived with bright eyes and gentle pressure, I would pour coffee, open the curtains, and tell my children only what they needed to hear. The rest, the patient parts, the plans under quiet tabs, could wait until I chose the right hour to lift them into the light. Adrian left early Monday morning, citing a project deadline and the need to coordinate with Lila. He hugged me at the door, promised we'd circle back on things, and drove off in his silver sedan without looking back. The street returned to its winter stillness, the kind where every sound carries too far. I stood on the porch, coffee cooling in my hands, watching a single crow pick at something near the curb. Inside, the house felt both lighter and more exposed. I went straight to the blue box, set it on the dining table, and opened it as if I were unlocking a vault. This wasn't about paranoia. It was about readiness. Nora had tucked her instructions like folded paper cranes, each one delicate but purposeful. The insurance tab revealed not just the life policy, but a secondary account I'd forgotten we opened years ago after a small inheritance from her aunt. I'd never touched it. Nora had labeled it for later. My fingers paused on that phrase. Later had arrived, uninvited, but here it was, steady, untouched, waiting. I spread the documents out in neat rows, the way my father used to lay tools before fixing a door. There was a will, of course, and a letter from Patrick Doyle, our lawyer, stating that all assets, including the Cedar Falls home, were solely in my name. I could almost hear Patrick's voice, measured, patient, with just enough bite to keep the greedy at bay. The phone rang. Caller ID, Lila. "Hi, Dad," she said, voice sugary but brisk. "Listen, I talked to Adrian last night, and we both think the sooner we get the house listed the better. The market's still hot. And Lila," I said, "I haven't even finished unpacking the sympathy cards." There was a pause. "I know, but we're just trying to be proactive. This isn't about rushing you, it's about protecting your future." I looked at the blue box. "My future is well protected." "What does that mean?" she asked, suspicion threading her tone. "It means," I said evenly, "your mother made sure of it." Another pause, heavier this time. "Are you hiding something from us?" I could have told her everything then, laid out the second set of keys, the villa's photo, the signed deeds from Portugal. But the image of Nora's careful handwriting, "Be generous with the right things," rose in my mind like a lighthouse beam. "No," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. "I'm just not ready to make any big moves." She exhaled, the kind of sigh that carries both frustration and calculation. "Fine, but we'll be there Wednesday to help you sort through things. At least agree to that." "Wednesday is fine," I said, "because agreeing to a date costs nothing if you own the clock." After hanging up, I called Patrick Doyle. He answered on the second ring. "Tom," he said, "I was expecting your call sooner." "I found Nora's folder," I told him. "It's thorough." He chuckled softly. "That's Nora, always 2 steps ahead. We'll need to make copies of everything and put them in the safety deposit box. And Tom, don't sign anything, not even a delivery slip, without running it by me." "I figured as much," I said. "And one more thing," he added, "when your kids come by, keep the blue box somewhere they won't stumble across it. People under grief sometimes make impulsive decisions." After the call, I carried the box upstairs and slid it under the false bottom of my closet trunk, a hiding place I hadn't used in decades. I placed an old quilt over it, one Nora's mother had sewn, its patchwork a camouflage of memories no one would dare disturb. The rest of the day I moved slowly, deliberately. I walked the yard, pruned the rosebush Nora planted, and made a note to repair the loose gate latch. Each task was a way to remind myself that I still lived here, that the house was not yet a line item on someone else's spreadsheet. That evening, I brewed tea in Nora's lemon mug. As the steam rose, I pictured the villa again, the white wall, the lemon tree, the sunlight I hadn't felt in years. That place was mine now, not because I'd claimed it, but because she had trusted me to know when to use it. Wednesday would come soon enough, with Leela's boxes and Adrian's ideas. When it did, I'd be ready, not to fight outright, but to steer the current without letting them see the rudder in my hands. Because some wars aren't won by loud victories, they're won by keeping certain doors closed until the day you choose to open them. Wednesday morning carried that flat grey light Oregon wears before rain. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I saw Adrian's car glide into the driveway, Lila's SUV right behind it. They hadn't told me they'd be arriving together, but the synchronized timing felt deliberate, like a united front. I opened the door before they could knock. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice even. "Morning, Dad," Lila replied, leaning in for a quick hug. She smelled faintly of citrus perfume, a little too bright for the weather. Adrian followed, carrying a cardboard box under one arm and scanning the living room the way an appraiser does, quiet, measuring glances. "We thought we'd get a jump on things," Lila said, shrugging off her coat. "Sort through the stuff you don't need, make piles for donation, maybe get a sense of what's worth keeping." "I appreciate the help," I said, "but I'm not in a hurry." "That's the thing, Dad," Adrian chimed in, setting the box on the coffee table. "Sometimes you have to move before the emotions settle too deep, otherwise it's twice as hard." Their words were smooth, rehearsed. I could almost see the bullet points they'd agreed on during the drive. I nodded slowly, letting silence stretch between us until Lila shifted her weight. "Well," she said, "how about we start with the attic?" "The attic?" Nora's kingdom of carefully labeled boxes and quilted memories. I felt a small knot form in my stomach. If we're going up there, we'll be careful. Everything stays in its place unless I say otherwise. They both agreed too quickly. In the attic's dim light, dust floated like tiny anchors in the air. Lila opened a box marked winter clothes and began making piles. Adrian picked up a photo album, flipping through with that faint, polite smile people use when they're looking for something other than the pictures in front of them. "What's in this?" he asked, tapping a cedar chest in the corner. "Blankets," I said without hesitation. Which was true, in a way. Beneath those blankets was the false bottom, where the blue box now rested. I stepped forward casually, resting my hand on the chest's lid. Some of Nora's mother's things, sentiment not up for discussion. He held my gaze for a moment, then nodded and moved on. We spent the next hour sorting through holiday decorations, old textbooks, a tangle of extension cords I hadn't seen in years. They made a donate pile large enough to fill the trunk of Adrian's car. Every so often, one of them would float a suggestion. We could clear out the guest room, or imagine how open the living room would feel without the big cabinet. Each one a small test, probing the perimeter of my resolve. Around noon, I suggested lunch. We sat at the kitchen table, sandwiches on mismatched plates. The conversation shifted to weather, Lila's work, Adrian's latest contract, but the undercurrent was still there, humming between their words. When they finally left, the house exhaled in that deep, slow way old timber does when pressure lifts. I carried the attic blankets to the laundry room, one by one as if airing them out. Beneath them, the blue box sat untouched, exactly where I'd left it. I closed the chest, ran my hand over the worn wood, and felt something steady return to me. They could come with boxes and ideas and plans. But as long as I held the keys to the house, to the villa, to the life Nora had outlined, I held the tempo, and I had no intention of letting anyone else set it. Thursday began with the hollow tap of rain against the kitchen window. It was the kind of weather that made everything feel slower, yet my mind was already moving ahead. I'd spent most of the night replaying Wednesday's visit in my head. Not with anger, but with the calm precision of someone reviewing a chess match. Every question, every sidelong glance from Adrian or Lila was a move on their part. And now it was my turn. After breakfast, I called Patrick Doyle. His voice was warm but laced with that lawyer's readiness. "They've started," I told him. "I assumed as much," he replied. "You're going to need a visible layer of protection, not just the blue box. Something they can see so they'll think twice before pushing too far." "You mean paperwork?" I said. "Exactly," he said. "A cease and desist if necessary, but softer at first. A formal letter confirming that you're of sound mind and that all property decisions rest solely with you. I'll have it notarized." By noon, Patrick had emailed a draft. Reading it felt like putting on armor. Plain words, unemotional but firm enough to hold a line. I printed 3 copies, tucking one into the kitchen drawer beside the spare batteries. Not because I expected to need it immediately, but because knowing it was there shifted something in my posture. The rain kept me indoors, so I turned to the other instructions in Nora's folder. One tab held a list of household accounts, utilities, insurance, property taxes, all already set to autopay. She had even written down passwords and security questions, as if she knew clarity would be my best defense. I spent the afternoon organizing those papers into a new binder. On its spine I wrote in thick black ink, "Current and active." The label was for me, but I also knew if anyone else saw it, they'd understand this was not the binder to trifle with. Around 3 o'clock the phone rang. It was Lila again. "Dad, I've been thinking," she began. "Maybe we should get an appraiser to come by. Not to sell, just to know the value." I kept my tone even. "The value of this house is not something I need to know right now." "It's just information," she said. "Information never hurts." "It can," I replied, "if it gives someone ideas they shouldn't have." Silence stretched. Then, more carefully, she said, "You're not making this easy." "I'm not supposed to," I told her. "This is my home, my life. Easy isn't the point." After the call ended, I made a pot of tea and sat at the dining table, watching the rain wash the street clean. I thought about the villa, its sunlit wall, the lemon tree bending slightly under its own fruit. Out there, no one would be talking about market value or appraisers. Out there, patience was the currency, and I was already rich in it. Before bed, I placed the new binder beside the blue box in the closet trunk, layering the blankets back over both. 2 shields now, one hidden, one visible. I slept knowing that while my children were busy drawing their plans, I was quietly reinforcing the walls, and in this kind of game, quiet walls hold longer than loud voices. By Friday the rain had wrung the color out of the sky, and the house smelled faintly of damp wood and sliced lemons. I had cut one and left it on the counter beside Nora's mug, not because I needed lemon in my tea, but because the brightness steadied my hands. Some mornings courage is as small as a citrus rind, glinting on a grey day. At 10 sharp there was a firm knock. 2 beats, pause, 2 beats again, the cadence of a stranger on a schedule. A man in a quilted vest stood on the porch, clipboard tucked against his ribs, smile polished to the edge of polite. "Mr. Bennett, I'm Caleb from High Ridge Realty. Your daughter said today would be convenient for a walkthrough." A cold thread unspooled in my chest, not fear exactly, but the tug of a line I hadn't agreed to tie around myself. I let the screen door stay between us. My daughter was mistaken. I said, "There won't be a walkthrough." He checked his form, pen hovering. "It's just preliminary. 30 minutes. Photos later if you approve." "You won't be taking photos," I said, and watched him try on a new expression, sympathetic, managerial, the one people use when they think you've lost the plot. "This home isn't for sale." He glanced past me as if the living room might contradict me. "Perhaps we could call Lila together, clear it up. We won't be calling anyone." I held his gaze until the smile frayed. "Thank you for coming. This conversation is over." He left with careful steps, the way a man exits a room with a sleeping dog he isn't sure is friendly. I waited until his SUV pulled away, then shut the door and leaned my forehead against the wood. The house hummed softly, the refrigerator's motor, the old furnace ticking to life, domestic noises that sounded like loyalty. My phone vibrated a minute later. "Lila, Dad, Caleb just texted me. You sent a realtor to my porch," I said, keeping my voice even, without asking. "It was only an exploratory visit. Information, remember? You said Wednesday would be fine to sort through things. This is part of sorting. Sorting isn't the same as staging," I said, "and it isn't the same as listing." I let the silence count to 5. "Don't do that again." She started to say, "You're making this difficult," then chose a softer lane. "I'm worried about you living alone in a big house with a leaky roof and stairs that creak. I'm trying to help." "I know you are," I said, and surprised us both by meaning it. "Help looks like dinner and company, not contracts." After we hung up, I took Patrick's letter from the kitchen drawer and read it once more. Simple sentences asserting what grief can blur: capacity, authority, choice. I placed it in an envelope and wrote both of my children's names on the front. Not a weapon, just a boundary you could hold in your hand. By noon I needed air. I pulled on my coat and walked to the hardware store 3 blocks down. The bell above the door rang with the same tired cheer it had rung for decades. Doug, the owner, lifted a palm in that unhurried way men in small towns say hello without making a fuss of it. I bought a bag of potting soil, a terracotta planter, and a sapling that the tag swore was a Meyer lemon, tolerant of containers and stubborn owners. "Bold choice for Cedar Falls," Doug said, ringing me up. "It's going near a window," I told him. "Some things grow if you keep your promise." Back home, I cleared a spot by the south-facing glass, the place Nora had called the winter sun. I filled the pot slowly, pressing the soil around the roots with the heel of my hand, then tied the young trunk to a thin stake so it would learn to stand without snapping. It looked almost ceremonial when I was done, a small flag planted in my own living room. I stepped back and felt something in my chest settle into place. Lines in the floor, invisible to everyone but me. At 3, Adrian called. His voice carried the voltage of someone mid-crisis, though the crisis was of his own making. "Dad, you turned the realtor away." "I did," I said. He inhaled, sharp. "We're running options here, and you're batting them down. That's not partnership." "I didn't sign up for a partnership," I said. "I signed a marriage certificate 32 years ago. The rest is mine to sign or not." "Don't do this," he said, and the words weren't a threat so much as a plea from a son who organizes his fear into spreadsheets. "You're isolating. It's not healthy." "I had a neighbor and a stranger on my porch before lunch," I said. "Isolation isn't the problem you think it is." He went quiet long enough that I imagined him closing his eyes, pressing thumb and forefinger to the bridge of his nose the way I do when a headache starts. "Fine," he said at last, "but you can't ignore the practicalities forever. If you won't meet with an appraiser, at least meet with a financial planner." "I've met with my lawyer," I said. "That's the planner I need right now." "Dad, I'm sending you and your sister a letter," I added. "Please read it. After that we can talk." I almost told him about the plant, about how absurdly brave a small tree can make a man feel, but I kept that for myself. When the mail flag went down later, I slid 2 envelopes into the box. The act felt more like setting a metronome than drawing a sword. They would receive the letters tomorrow, and the tempo would change because the page would say what my voice refused to load with heat. Evening thinned the light to a kind of pewter, and the house moved through its rituals, the heat kicking on, the floorboards settling, the porch light winking to life. I boiled pasta, ate standing at the counter like a man between trains, then washed the pot and set it upside down to drip. The lemon sapling cast a delicate lattice on the wall, a promise pretending to be a shadow. After dinner I made one more call, not to Patrick, not to the kids, but to a number Nora had written next to the word backup in her tidy hand. International ring. A woman's voice, warm and textured, answered on the second tone. "Boa tarde?" "Good afternoon," I said, rusty but game. "Is this Isabel?" A small smile entered her voice without changing its shape. "It is. You must be Tom." For a moment I couldn't speak. Hearing my name in a stranger's mouth as if it had always belonged there unlatched something in me. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Nora said you might call," Isabel went on softly. "When you were ready, not before." "I'm trying to be," I said. "Ready, I mean." "Then there is time," she said. "The house has not moved. The keys are where she said they would be. The lemon tree is heavy with fruit." A gentle laugh. "I have been stealing a few, to keep it honest." We made a plan that wasn't a plan so much as an agreement to speak again next week. No dates, no tickets, only a thread laid between 2 places like a line the tide couldn't cut. When I hung up, the kitchen felt larger, as if the walls had slid back an inch to make room for the future standing in the doorway. I turned off the lights and walked the rooms once more, my palm brushing wood and paint, and the brass of the banister polished by years of ordinary hands. On the way to bed I paused by the lemon sapling. Its leaves were still, the window a dark pane. I touched the stake lightly and felt the slight give, the way a structure holds and remembers even after the pressure moves on. "I see you," I said, "not to the plant, not to the house, not even to Nora, though maybe to all 3. I'm not selling you to a schedule." Upstairs, the old clock clicked through another minute. Outside, the town settled. Tomorrow would bring whatever scripts my children had rehearsed, and I would answer with the kind of line that cannot be misheard, because it isn't spoken at all. It's drawn underfoot, firm enough to stand on, patient enough to wait. Some battles are won that way, not by advancing, but by refusing to be moved. Saturday morning carried a brittle cold, the kind that made the air sting a little as you breathed it in. I left the house early, locking the door with the kind of care you give to something you know others have been eyeing. The streets were quiet, just the sound of my shoes on the sidewalk and the distant hum of a delivery truck. Patrick Doyle's office sat above a bakery on Main Street, its front window catching the low winter sun. I'd known Patrick since he was a fresh-faced associate, back when Nora and I updated our wills after Lila was born. Over the years, he'd earned my trust by doing something rare in his profession, listening before speaking. "Tom," he said, standing to shake my hand as I stepped into his warm, wood-paneled office. "I read the realtor incident in your eyes before you even opened your mouth." I sat across from him, the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls drifting up from the bakery below. "They're pushing harder," I said. "First an attic clean-out, then an appraiser, now a walkthrough I never agreed to." Patrick leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Which is why we're going to formalize your position. I drafted the letter for both Adrian and Lila, confirming your full mental capacity and sole ownership rights. Once they read it, any further interference edges into legal territory." I nodded, feeling the quiet weight of that protection settle into place. "And if they don't back off, then we take the next step," Patrick said simply. "Restraining orders aren't just for strangers, Tom. Family can be legally restrained from harassment too." The words sat between us for a moment, heavier than the oak desk. I wasn't eager to take it that far, but it was a relief to know the road existed if I needed it. Patrick slid 2 envelopes toward me, each addressed in his careful block lettering. "Hand these over in person if you can. No misunderstandings, no claims of lost mail." I slipped them into my coat pocket. They won't be happy. They don't have to be, he said, his tone even. They just have to understand. Before I left, Patrick added, and Tom, when the time comes for you to leave that house, make sure it's on your terms, not theirs. Back home, I found both of their cars in my driveway, as if summoned by the ink on those envelopes. They were in the kitchen when I walked in, coffee already poured, their jackets draped over chairs. Dad, Lila began, we wanted to. I held up a hand, setting the envelopes on the table like cards in a game. Neither of them realized they'd already lost. These are from my attorney. Read them before you say another word about the house. Adrian's brow tightened, but he opened his envelope first, scanning the page. Lila followed, her lips pressing into a thin line. This is unnecessary, Adrian said finally. No, I replied, this is clarity. You've both been operating under the assumption that my grief makes me weak. It doesn't. If anything, it's made me sharper. Lila set her letter down, her eyes searching my face for some give. We were only trying to help. Help looks different than you think, I said, and if you want to help me, you'll respect what's written in those letters. They didn't stay long after that. The air between us had changed. Cooler, but cleaner. When the front door shut behind them, I felt the house take a deeper breath, as if it too had been waiting for me to draw the line. That afternoon I moved the lemon sapling to a spot where it caught more sun. As I watered it, I thought of Isabel's voice over the phone and the promise of a place where no one would question why I stayed, or why I left. The villa was still out there, holding space for me. For now, though, I was exactly where I needed to be, behind walls that were mine, guarded by both paper and patience, and I intended to keep it that way. Sunday morning broke with a pale sun trying to push through thin clouds. The quiet was short-lived. At 9:30 the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Adrian and Lila again, standing shoulder to shoulder like they'd practiced this formation. Adrian held a grocery bag. Lila carried a binder. Morning, Dad, Adrian said, stepping in without waiting for me to invite them. We thought we'd make breakfast together. And talk, Lila added, as if the second purpose could be slipped past me if it followed the smell of coffee beans and fresh bread. In the kitchen, Adrian set eggs and bacon on the counter while Lila placed her binder on the table, turning it so it faced me. We've been looking at options, she began, her tone pitched somewhere between friendly and persuasive. If you sold this place even at a conservative estimate, you could buy a smaller home outright, set aside money for travel, and still have enough left for. I held up a hand. Stop right there, I know what you think you're offering. But my life doesn't fit in your spreadsheet. Adrian, flipping bacon into the skillet, said, Dad, this isn't about control, it's about safety. Stairs, repairs, heating bills. You're not 25 anymore. I know how old I am, I said. I also know how to walk up a flight of stairs. Lila's eyes flicked toward the binder. Just look at the numbers. I didn't. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Patrick's letter, the one they'd already read. I set it on top of her binder. That hasn't changed since yesterday. Neither have I. The air in the room shifted, the sizzle of bacon filling the silence they didn't want to leave empty. Finally, Adrian sighed. I understand, I said, softening my voice, but worry is yours to carry. My choices are mine. We ate in near silence after that, the meal heavier than the food on our plates. When they left, Lila's binder remained on the table, unopened by me. I waited until their cars disappeared down the street, then slid it into a drawer I rarely used, out of sight, out of reach. Later, I walked into the living room and checked on the lemon sapling. Its leaves had turned slightly toward the window, searching for light. I turned the pot so it could stretch in the other direction, a reminder that growth doesn't happen in a straight line. It needs room to reach, to pivot, to adjust without someone forcing the angle. That evening I called Isabel. She answered on the first ring. I think I'm getting closer, I told her. To leaving, she asked. To knowing when, I said. For now I'm holding the ground I have. You'll know, she said, because the choice will feel like opening a door, not closing one. I slept that night with the window cracked, the cool air slipping in like a promise. Somewhere out there, beyond my children's plans and their binders, was a place waiting for me. But here, for now, I still had battles to win, and I intended to win them quietly. Monday started with a thin frost on the lawn, each blade of grass edged in silver under the early sun. I was standing at the kitchen counter pouring coffee when the knock came, not the quick courtesy tap of a neighbor, but a steady, deliberate thud. I opened the door to find Adrian alone, hands in his jacket pockets, jaw set tight. Dad, we need to talk, he said, stepping past me before I could answer. In the kitchen, I replied, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit. I've been patient. Lila's been patient. But this resistance to even discussing the future, it's not working. We've talked to a lawyer. I felt my spine straighten. What lawyer? A family attorney, he said. Someone who can guide us if we need to petition for conservatorship. It's not what we want. But stop right there, I said, my voice low but steady. You're threatening to take away my right to make my own decisions. I'm saying we can't stand by if we think you're making unsafe choices. I studied his face, the tightness around the eyes, the way his fingers twitched inside his pockets. Fear lived there, but so did ambition. Unsafe for who, Adrian? Me or your plans? He flinched, just slightly, and didn't answer. Without breaking eye contact, I walked to the hall closet and pulled out the blue box. I set it on the table, opened the lid just enough for him to see the neat rows of folders, the labeled tabs, the notarized papers. Your mother and I prepared for everything. Everything. I am not drifting through this without a map. His eyes darted over the contents, trying to absorb what he could. What is all this? Security, I said simply, and none of it requires your approval. For a moment the tension held, like two chess players frozen mid-match. Then he stepped back, shoulders slumping. You make it hard to help you, Dad. Maybe you need to redefine help, I said. He left without another word, the sound of the door closing echoing through the house. I returned the box to its hiding place, covering it with the quilt, the smell of cedar rising like a shield around it. That evening, I called Patrick Doyle and told him about Adrian's threat. Let them try, Patrick said, his voice calm but firm. They'll lose before they start, but it's good they've shown you their hand. It means you know exactly what you're up against. After the call, I sat by the south-facing window where the lemon sapling stood. The last light of the day slanted across its leaves, and I thought of Isabel's words, "You'll know when it's time to open the door." For now, that door stayed closed. But I was starting to see the outline of it in the distance, and I knew when I stepped through, it would be on my terms alone. By Tuesday morning, the air between my children and me felt like a taut wire, silent but straining. I'd decided it was time to send a signal of my own, one that didn't need raised voices or long explanations. I went through the house collecting the things they'd helpfully brought over in recent weeks. Lila's stack of storage bins, Adrian's grocery staples I hadn't touched, even that binder of downsizing options she'd left behind. Each item went into a sturdy cardboard box. At the top I placed a short note in my own handwriting. Appreciate the thought. Not needed at this time. By mid-morning, I was in the post office, the boxes lined up on the counter. The clerk, a woman with sharp glasses and an easy smile, raised an eyebrow. Sending a few care packages, something like that, I said, sliding cash across the counter. Back home, the house felt lighter, less like a staging area for someone else's plans. I brewed coffee and carried it into the living room, the lemon sapling catching the corner of my eye. It stood straighter than when I'd first planted it, its small leaves fanning toward the light. Quiet growth. My kind of message. Just before lunch, my phone buzzed. Adrian's name. You mailed me a box, he said, without preamble. Yes, I replied. It had all my stuff in it. It had things I didn't ask for. A pause then. This is childish. No, I said evenly. It's clarity. Now you know exactly what belongs where. That shut him up for a beat. You're pushing us away. I'm keeping my space, I corrected. There's a difference. Less than an hour later, Lila called, her voice cooler than usual. Dad, I got your package. I thought you might, I said. You're making a point. Yes. Another pause, then she let out a quiet laugh that wasn't entirely without respect. You've got more fight in you than I thought. I've had it all along, I said. You just mistook my patience for weakness. After the calls, I rang Patrick Doyle to tell him about my little exercise. That, he said, wasn't petty. It was strategic. They'll think twice now, because you've shown them you're willing to act, not just talk. The rest of the day passed without further interruptions. I read in the study, fixed the loose latch on the back gate, and watered the sapling. Each small task was its own quiet refusal to be managed. As the sun set, I imagined the boxes sitting in my children's homes, an unspoken reminder that the house they wanted to control was not theirs to shape. Sometimes the simplest returns carry the loudest echoes. By Wednesday morning, I could feel the storm brewing before it arrived. A tension hung in the air like the static before a lightning strike. Around 10, both cars appeared in my driveway, doors slamming harder than the wind could justify. They didn't wait for an invitation. Adrian marched in first, Leela right behind him. Neither carried groceries or polite smiles this time. "Enough," Adrian said, planting himself in the center of the living room. "We've tried the gentle route, Dad. We've offered help. We've brought solutions, but you keep shutting us out." "I'm not shutting you out," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "I'm keeping my life in my own hands." Leela stepped forward, her expression harder than I'd ever seen. We spoke to the attorney again. "Conservatorship is still on the table. If you keep resisting," I didn't let her finish. I walked to the hall closet, opened the cedar chest, and lifted out the blue box. Setting it on the coffee table, I flipped open the lid and began pulling out folders one by one. Deeds, insurance documents, notarized letters, the binder I'd assembled from Nora's instructions. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is my life. Every account is paid, every asset is protected. Your mother made sure I could stand on my own, and I'm not about to betray that trust because you're uncomfortable with my independence." Adrian glanced at the documents, his jaw tightening. "You've been hiding things from us." "I've been protecting them," I corrected, "and myself, and in a way, even you, because once you see the full picture, you'll have no excuse to try and take control." Lila crossed her arms. "We're just trying to prevent mistakes." I looked at her directly. "You're trying to move me like a chess piece, but I'm not on your board." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Adrian finally muttered, "You're making this impossible." "Good," I said, "because the easier it is for you, the harder it becomes for me, and I intend to make this as hard as necessary." Without another word, I began packing the documents back into the box, the sound of paper sliding against paper filling the room. When I was done, I carried it upstairs, my footsteps deliberate, each one marking the boundary between us. By the time I came back down, they were gone. The driveway was empty, the cold air sharper now. That evening I called Isabel. "It's getting close," I told her. "To the move?" she asked. "To the moment," I said. "When I stop defending and start acting, then you'll need your plan ready," she replied softly. "I already have one," I said, and as I set the phone down, I realized I meant it. The pieces were already in place, quiet, precise, and waiting for the right day to be revealed. Thursday morning dawned with a pale sun, and the kind of brittle cold that made the boards of the porch groan under your feet. I woke earlier than usual. Not out of habit, but because my mind was already rehearsing the steps ahead. For weeks I'd been deflecting, blocking, holding my ground. Now it was time to move, quietly, so they wouldn't realize I was no longer just defending. I started with a phone call to Patrick Doyle. "It's time," I told him. "You're sure?" he asked. "I've been sure for days. Now I'm ready." We ran through the plan like soldiers reviewing a map. The villa in Portugal was already secure. Deeds in my name, utilities maintained, taxes current. My accounts here were protected, my will updated to remove any immediate access for Adrian or Lila. The only loose thread was the Cedar Falls house, and that was about to be tied in a knot they couldn't undo. By mid-morning, I'd called in a favor from a retired judge I knew from Nora's charity work. He'd agreed to witness and sign an affidavit confirming my mental capacity and the legitimacy of all my property holdings. It was a layer of protection my children would never see coming. After lunch, I went into the attic, not to clean but to retrieve a set of boxes that had sat untouched for decades. Inside were old photographs, letters and keepsakes from when the kids were small. I chose a few items and placed them in separate cartons, labeling each with their names. These would be delivered to them when I was gone from this house, not before. The act was more than sentimental, it was strategic. By giving them something personal later, I'd leave them with no argument that I had shut them out completely. It would be proof that my decisions came from care, not spite. In the late afternoon I called Isabel. Her voice, warm as the sunlight she lived under, steadied me. "I think the time's close," I said, "not just to leave, but to do it without warning." "That is best," she replied. "Surprises are only dangerous when they're someone else's. When they're yours, they can be freedom." I pictured the lemon tree by her villa wall, heavy with fruit, the way she'd described it. "Everything here is ready. Once I make the call, I'll be gone in days. And you will arrive to open windows, fresh bread, and a place where no one is measuring your steps," she promised. As the evening settled in, I sat by my own small lemon sapling. Its leaves caught the last light of day, casting shadows on the wall like bars of a gate. Soon those bars would open. Upstairs, the blue box sat under its quilt, the binder beside it, each paper in perfect order. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I was simply waiting for the exact moment when the trap would close, without a raised voice, without a fight, just the quiet slam of a door they'd never get their hands on again. By Friday morning, the weather had turned. Clear skies after weeks of grey, the kind of light that makes even an old house look like it's holding its breath. I took my coffee by the window, watching the steam curl into the air, and knew this was the day. Not the end, not quite, but the first real step toward it. I began the way Nora would have, with a list. One column for what stayed, one for what went, one for what I'd take with me. The house was full of memories, but I didn't need all of them to travel. A few clothes, the blue box, my passport, and the lemon sapling, small enough to carry, strong enough to survive the move. By mid-morning, I called Patrick Doyle. "It's happening," I said. He didn't ask if I was sure. "The documents are ready. I'll meet you at the bank in an hour." At the bank, we placed duplicates of every deed, affidavit, and legal paper in my safety deposit box. Then Patrick handed me an envelope addressed to the kids. "They'll get this after you're gone. It explains everything. Your choice, your rights, and the fact that every step was legal." Back home, I set the envelope on my desk. Not to be mailed yet, but ready. In the afternoon, I called Isabel. "I'm booking the flight," I told her. Her laugh was warm, almost relieved. "Good. The guest room is ready. The lemon tree is waiting. 2 weeks from now," I said. "Enough time to close things here quietly." She understood without me explaining. The boxes I'd deliver to Adrian and Lila, the utilities I'd transfer, the locks I'd change on my way out so no one could walk in behind me. Evening fell soft and gold. I watered the lemon sapling, letting the soil darken, the scent rising like something older than the house itself. I imagined planting it in Isabel's courtyard, where it could grow taller than any argument my children might still be having in my absence. As I stood there, I realized the most satisfying part wasn't the leaving. It was knowing that when I left, it would be so clean, so final, that there'd be nothing for them to undo. The house would stand empty for a time, but not in defeat. It would be a monument to a decision made with patience and defended without apology. And somewhere thousands of miles away, another door would open into sunlight. The game was almost over, but I'd be the one walking away with the last move.